Hello, everyone, and welcome to Level the Field Leadership. My name is Dr. Rachel Gallardo, and I am very, very excited to introduce our guests for today. Everything that I have talked about in previous episodes has really just kind of led up to this point because Jennifer and I are on the same page, especially whenever it comes to leadership and background and experience and everything else. So I know you're going to get a lot out of our discussion today. If this is your first time, I know you have zero concept of what I'm talking about, so hopefully this won't be your last time. But if you do like what you hear, be sure to comment and subscribe so that way you can be notified each time new content is posted. I do believe that it is important for us to level the field of challenges that we're going to encounter in the work environment because they are going to emerge. But it's how we deal with it that's more important. And whenever we have those tools kind of in our toolkit, it can be a lot more manageable whenever we have to deal with the things that are going on around us. I also believe that workplace burnout is very real, and anything we can do to help reduce burnout fatigue in our leadership roles is going to have a positive impact on our team, positive impact on us, positive impact in our homes. It's just good all around. So let me go ahead and introduce you. So Jennifer Ledet is on a mission to empower leaders and executives to become the CEO of their own lives, leading with intention rather than by chance. As a recovering HR executive, which I think that's a hilarious term, I'm going to have to start using that. She understands the unique challenges faced by today's leaders, especially women. Jennifer helps leaders to tap into their strengths, overcome limiting beliefs, and lead with purpose and passion. So, Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm very excited to get into our discussion.
Rachel, thanks for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. And as our returning listeners know, I do like to kind of base our conversation around scripture. And since this is kind of a woman to woman conversation, I thought that Psalm 68:11 would be perfect. It says,
Mhm.
"The Lord announces the word, and the women who proclaim it are a mighty throng." So, Jennifer, let's just dive right on in. So, your book is titled Live and Lead by Choice, Not by Chance. How does this relate to the context of women in their roles as leaders? I mean, what inspired you to write this book? What background gave you the kind of oomph to go ahead and write this book?
Yeah. Well, for me, it was a lot about, and I so appreciate that you started with scripture because I start my day that way and really believe that I'm trying to focus on his will and be guided by that. And what I was seeing is a lot of women who, for lack of a better term, were living on autopilot.
Yeah.
So they were maybe climbing the corporate ladder. And as each rung may have been presented to them, they just accepted it and without thinking. And what it really came down to in working with in coaching women and so forth is that they had never really defined success for themselves. So that rung on the ladder wasn't their choice. It was just like an auto response. And they might have been conditioned by their upbringing, their parents, their family,
Hmm.
our culture, or the culture of the organization, because we often don't realize that organizations have a culture, and some of them, especially some of these big behemoths, it's like, well, I mean, hello, it's just expected that we're going to take that next step.
Right.
And so, what I found is that we all need to take a step back and first get clear on who we are and what we want. Deepening self awareness is so very important. And so often we go, 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 go. We don't take the time to decide for ourselves what we want and what success would mean for us. Self awareness is going to give you options.
Mm.
So, the way I like to say it is that if I have spinach in my teeth, I really want you to tell me that I have spinach in my teeth.
Right.
And
I see
now
no
once I
spinach. You're
Yeah,
good. I
thank
see no
you,
spinach.
thank you. I'm paranoid about that. When I speak, it's like, "No, I'm not eating salad before I speak," because I have this fear. But, once I know it's there, now I have a choice. I can go on and rock my spinach in my teeth if I choose to, or I can take care of it. But if you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So I encourage women and especially women Because we live it often, and many of us work in male-dominated fields. So women may have a different definition, and really should and will have a different definition of success. And each person is going to have a different definition of success.
Hmm. Hmm.
But you know, all leadership begins with self-leadership. Self-leadership begins with self-awareness.
Right. Right.
So, yeah, that's kind of the impetus for the book, was that I was having these similar conversations with coaching clients, and I'm like, this is a theme here. This is a pattern that I'm detecting.
Yeah.
So I wanted to share what I've learned, and it's not so much that I'm the expert. It's just that, or I have all the answers. It's just that I know the questions to ask.
Sure.
And I think that helps people to draw out the answers that they already have.
Well, and I think that that can be really much more challenging for women in particular because there's so much opportunity for comparison, right? Like we're
Yeah,
inundated with social media and then even our best friends, like what they're doing. And it's like, oh, well, I'm not doing that. Is that okay? And it's very easy for us to get into that element of comparison and
yeah.
then lose ourselves because we're trying to emulate what other people around us are doing. Do you find that some of your clients really struggle with that?
Absolutely. And the thing, I call it OCD, obsessive comparison disorder.
Yes.
So of course, I've suffered from it. Many of the folks that I work with suffer from it. But the thing is, when you really deepen that self-awareness, you understand it's about what makes you tick and what ticks you off, understanding what are your strengths, how can you contribute at your highest. So
Mm.
if I'm trying to be Rachel, I'm going to be a really craptacular Rachel, but I can be an excellent Jen. And so when we can really lean into that, and I have stories that I tell when I speak and keynote at conferences, and people come up to me afterwards inevitably and say, God, that so resonated with me because I was trying to be like some other speakers that I had seen when I was an up and coming speaker, or when I was doing coaching work. I was trying to, and when I can really lean into my God given gifts and talents and strengths, then I can contribute at my highest,
Mhm.
and feel the most at ease, stress free, fulfilled. So it all goes hand in hand.
Yeah. Yeah. And whenever you and I first met, one of the things that we talked about were it was actually twofold. I don't know if you remember this or not.
Yeah.
We talked about perfectionism and we talked
Yes.
about imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And to your point, if we're trying to be like somebody else, we're never going to attain it. And then also too, we're just going to be duplicating the same exact message that this other person has,
Yeah.
right? But we have and it's particularly true for women because in this area, this is the area that I really research and try to hone in on. We do tend to get in our own way as far as
Yeah.
thinking that we're capable of doing something or thinking that we're able to move forward because that imposter syndrome, and if it's not exactly right, then I'm not going to even bother to do it at all. Can you speak to
Right.
that a little bit? Like what
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
recommendations do you have? And it's not just women. I mean, I want to acknowledge the fact that there are clearly men that struggle with this too. But just what recommendations do you have for people that might be dealing with some of these mental barriers that get in their way?
Oh, absolutely. And look, this is at first blush not going to be very, it's not going to be much comfort to your audience members. But I will say that as you progress to the next level, you think, well, then that imposter syndrome will lessen and it'll go away. And the bad news is, no, boo, it's going to become worse. But
Yeah.
the good news about that is when you can observe it and you can recognize it rearing its ugly head, you just go, "Oh, I get it. It's because I'm taking a risk, and it's because I'm being more of myself, and I am getting out of my comfort zone, that this is gonna come up. So when you can kind of take a step back and notice it and go, I know what's happening here. And you can say, well, that's good. It's not necessarily gonna be comfortable, but when you recognize what that discomfort represents,
Mhm.
it's that you're stepping out. And your brain is going to try to protect you. So your brain just, the status quo, while it may not be fulfilling, it's pretty comfortable,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So your brain just wants you to stay put. And it's going to protect you from all of that. And that imposter syndrome is your brain trying to pull you back in. When you can recognize it for what it is, then you can just, you have a choice in that moment. And, you have the option to go along with what the imposter syndrome is telling you, which is, who do you think you are to be doing this? You don't know what you're talking about. These other people are smarter and more experienced and more sophisticated than you. Or you can say, I know what this is, and I'm going to act anyway.
Mhm. Mhm.
What we fail to realize so often in those moments is that you still have a choice. You
Yeah.
still have a choice. You
Yeah.
don't have to listen to that little devil on your shoulder, that little demon that wants to hold you back. And you
Right.
know that that devil, that little demon is your ego, and it's
Mhm.
trying to protect you. And it's kind of like, um if I had a guard dog, which I totally don't. I have a golden retriever who will open the door
Aw.
for robbers and welcome them in.
Aw, how sweet.
But if you have a guard dog and it's somebody that you trust and that's coming to your door, but your dog is barking and trying to keep them out. It's just he's trying to protect you.
Sure.
And so when you can look at it that way, you can accept it and say, it's okay. I appreciate it. I'm good. This is okay.
Right. Right. Yeah, I always encourage people whenever they say that they're feeling intimidated, I go huge, like grandiose. I'm like, okay, so if you do this thing, is your house gonna burn down? And they're like,
Yeah.
well, no. And I'm like, are all of your family gonna be wiped off the planet? And they're like, well, no. I go, so what's the real problem? And I
Yeah.
think I think oftentimes if we put it in the actual context of, okay, you're saying that this is something to be concerned about, but there are plenty of other things in the world
Right.
to really be concerned with. It reduces that stress a little bit, kind of
Yeah.
calms our nervous system, so that
Yeah.
way we can actually do the thing and do it afraid, but maybe put
Right.
it in a little bit bigger of a scope.
Yeah.
Okay, so you give this presentation, you don't have to go home to these people. You're not married to these people. They're
Right.
probably never going to see you again. Like, so
Yeah.
what's the real fear?
What's the fear? The fear is discomfort. We're
Yeah.
addicted to comfort in this society. I have a friend who is from Australia, and I don't know Fahrenheit, Celsius, and all of that, but
Mm,
they talk about the fact that we Americans are like, we have to have this, you know, AC and heat set so that we never experience a moment of cold or hot or anything that's going to be the slightest bit uncomfortable. And we're addicted to it.
yeah.
Um, I saw a meme the other day and it's like, it said something to the effect of, life is like an old-fashioned TV. If you want to change it, you have to get up and go change the channel. We don't have a remote control.
Yeah.
And we're just also addicted to comfort.
Yeah.
You're not going to die,
Yeah.
and I'm pretty sure in this situation, like you
Yeah.
said, when you put it in that context, it's like, is anybody going to die? You
Right.
know, um, and you kind of giggled about my recovering HR executive. I remember in the very early days of my career, and I had a boss who said, "Listen, the one thing you need to remember is that most things most challenges, most decisions are not emergencies.
Mm,
So and I learned this and I took it in and I coach my clients in the same way. It's like most things are not going to suffer if you take a moment, if you take a beat, if you sleep on it and say, I'll make a decision tomorrow or I'll get back to you tomorrow.
right.
Firing somebody in, the blink of an eye, is probably not going to be a good idea. Um, the other thing I see a lot is people, women in particular, want to have all the answers
Mm,
all the time. And that in itself is stressful.
right.
So we bring a lot of that on ourselves. Nobody expects you to have all the answers. I don't care if it is in your given field.
Right.
You're allowed to say, I don't know, but I'm going to get back to you. I don't
Yeah.
know, but let's research this together. And that relieves a lot of the stress. And BTW, that is a way of building trust within your team because they see you as, oh, she's
Right.
not perfect. She's
Right.
human.
Right.
And you
I
asked about perfectionism too. And I think that's part of it is that we don't want to be seen as not having all the answers.
Sure. Sure. I think an important question too to add to both of the ones that you noted is to simply ask, when do you need this by? Because
Yeah,
I think too often people will come to us and say that they need to have something done, and you already have a laundry list of just so many things that you need to accomplish. And
right.
personally, I know that in my mind, it's like, okay, there's an immediate urgency because I want to be a servant leader. I want to
Yeah,
be able to help this person and get them what they need so they can move forward. So in my mind, I try to get it done within a day or two. And if I had just simply asked the question, when do you need this by? And they tell me, oh, in a couple of weeks. Okay, well, that alleviates some of the pressure to have to get it done like right then and there. And
the
I
urgency.
think too often we don't ask that question and we put more stress on ourselves unnecessarily.
We do. And, I'm a big fan of Stephen Covey, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, and
Yep.
all of
Yep.
his work. And he talks about we sacrifice the important for the urgent. And often the urgent is not defined as urgent by us. It's somebody else telling us that or like you said, we're assuming it's urgent when in
Right.
fact it probably isn't.
Right. Right.
Um, Again, we always have that choice. We
Right.
always have the choice, like you said, to say, when do you need this by? We always have the choice to say, I have, he talks about, Stephen Covey talks about um, the important being things like fire prevention so that we don't end up in fire fighting and putting out fires. So those important things are things like fire prevention. And we need to not neglect that. And we need to not let other people's priorities um, um, push out the fact that we need to do fire prevention. So,
Right. Right. But if you're only looking at your emails that are constantly rolling through your inbox, before you know it, 6 months have come by. You
yeah,
haven't done anything from a safety standpoint. And then when there's a fire, it's like, oh man, we had 6 months to prepare, and I was too busy worried about all of the emails that were coming through.
the day-to-dayness of
Yeah.
life.
Right. Right.
And so often I think that we don't realize that we have a lot more agency than we realize. We have
Mm-hmm.
a lot more choice in things. Um, in working with women in particular, I often will coach them and how they can address their leaders and say, I am committed to these projects, priorities, whatever. And um, what, if they're being assigned some other project, which do you want me to focus on so that I can be sure and give my highest to the one that you determine as priority. I don't
Hmm.
think anybody's going to really argue with you when you ask them that question,
Right.
because they want you to be able to, and it also is implying that if I tried to work on both simultaneously, something's going to give and something's going to suffer. So I want
Right.
to give my highest and best. So which would you have me work on first?
Right. And that kind of leads to another point that I wanted to get into, which is with my favorite B word, which is the word boundaries.
Yeah.
Um, because whenever we remember, if I can get the words that come out of my mouth, that we do have choices and that we can ask questions, when do you need this by, or let's work on this together. You are establishing some sort of boundary, so that way
Yeah.
you give yourself space to be able to do the other things that are day to day that have to get done. Because, oh, by the way, whenever I leave here at work, I have to go home and be a wife. I've got to be a mom. I've got to be a daughter. I've got to be, insert whatever blank happens to
Yeah.
be there. So, can you talk a little bit about boundaries and what
Yeah.
you've learned just over the years, especially in all your years of HR, just how important it is to have those boundaries in place?
Yeah. Well, I'm the boundary queen because I struggled with that mightily for most of my life. What I've come to understand and what I write about in the book is that a boundary is something you set not for the other person, but you set it for yourself. You decide ahead of time where that line goes and how you respond, react when and if it is crossed. You're the only thing you can control, as you know, circumstances, other people, we cannot control those things. The only thing we can control is ourselves and our own responses to other people. So I'm deciding ahead of time how I'm going to act. And I'll tell you, I had a recent experience with this with a family member. And I'm talking about this person is jumping up and down on my last nerve, like um triggering me right and left, just all up in my business. And so I had to go back to prayer in this season of Lent and think about I'm the one who's responding that way. I have a choice. This person can do whatever they want to do. I need to decide how am I going to act and how am I going to behave. Shakespeare and my mama always said, to thine own self be true. And
Mm,
so I'm back to center. I'm grounded and I know that I can't control that person and I'm not even going to try.
mhm,
And
mhm,
that's for them to deal with. But for me, this is how I am going to act. And when we make that decision ahead of time, it is so freeing and it really alleviates a lot of the stress. Because a lot of the stress is we don't know what they're going to do. And so we're trying to be prepared of how we're going to react. No, you need to decide ahead of time. And I think that it really helps a lot. Another thing that I've encouraged my clients to think about is that you're constantly teaching people and training people in how to treat you. And you're giving them clues and cues to what you will and won't accept.
mm,
When it comes to corporate culture and working with teams and so forth, I always tell them you've got what you've got because you've either created it or you've condoned it.
mm,
So we're communicating what we'll accept all the time. So if, I'm an independent consultant and coach and have been running my own business for many, many years. And I have set some boundaries. Those boundaries aren't necessarily verbally communicated or in writing to my clients. They're just boundaries in how I'm going to run my business. And so, what that looks like on a practical level is if I get a call, which I don't, by the way. But if I were to get a call at 7 o'clock at night or anytime at night, anytime after 5 o'clock, I'm probably not going to take it
right,
because I'm not working. And
right.
I set that boundary for myself a long time ago. Now, if it's a client that I'm working with and I suspect they might be having an issue, whatever, there are times when I will, but I've never had a problem with people abusing that. Why? Because they know that they can usually get a response from me during working hours. I've
Right.
never set the expectation that I'm available 24/7, that I want to take their calls, or that they should think that I'm going to take their calls.
Hmm.
And by the way, that's how I was when I was working in a company. I always kind of non-verbally, but set those boundaries by not being available in other times that
Sure.
I'm not working.
Yeah. Yeah.
So sometimes we have to communicate those boundaries verbally, um, in a situation where someone's yelling or being disrespectful. You're well within your rights to say, I'm gonna leave now. And when you can talk and we can have a conversation calmly and respectfully, then I'm happy to do that. And if you're gonna yell, I'm gonna leave. And that's how this is gonna go.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
gonna tolerate that.
Right.
With a
Right.
corporate culture, it's the same kind of thing. What we're tolerating, we're essentially condoning. So
Right.
if there's bad behavior, if there's disrespect, if there's any of that kind of thing, um, when you don't put a stop to it, when you don't nip it in the bud, people assume it's okay.
Right.
One of the big things that I talk to clients about, and it's like they have to look in the mirror for themselves too, but it's gossip.
Mm.
Gossip is a cancer that will eat up your culture. Um, and so for a lot of companies, a lot of my leaders, they make it a policy, zero tolerance for gossip. And that's one way to clean up your culture, I can tell you.
Yeah.
So yeah, boundaries are good. Boundaries are great for alleviating a lot of stress because you're pre-planning, you're pre-deciding how you're
Right.
going to respond to something.
Right. And that goes back to what we originally talked about too. Because if you're self-confident and you're self-assured in who you are, you're able to identify more easily if somebody is crossing into a territory that has violated your own personal boundary. And
Thanks.
so I think being that more self-assured, you're more likely to say, okay, we've reached a point where this conversation isn't going any further. I'm open to having this conversation again or to continue it, but we both need to take a time out.
Yeah.
So can we schedule a time in a couple of days for us to have this, to continue our conversation?
Yes.
And there's nothing wrong with that. How other people respond whenever you set a boundary says more about the other person than it does to them,
Exactly.
or than it does to you, because if you set a boundary and they get upset about it, then at least for me, that tells me that you are trying to control, manipulate the situation,
Mhm.
invoke some sort of emotion that was trying to prompt me for a response. And because I've identified it and said, no, you're not allowed to go any further, now
Yeah.
you want to get upset. So that tells me you're not getting your way, which just further means that I'm doing the right thing to protect myself.
Yes.
But if you don't take that time to really know who you are and know what your abilities are and know what your boundaries are, it's very easy for people to just kind of plow right over it.
Exactly. And I think that um ultimately people will respect you more for having set the boundary. And it also is about setting expectations. Like I said earlier, it's not giving if you I'm using something simple like a out off uh um after hours phone call or something. But when you take those calls, don't I had a client who was like, I had she has about an hour drive to and from work commute. And she said, I spent the whole hour on the phone on the way home with this problem and that problem. And I said, and and she's got two teenagers when she got home. And I said, how did you walk in the door? And she's like, a jangled, frazzled mess.
Mm.
I said, so is that the you that you want to show up for your kids and your family? No, not at all.
Right,
Okay, so now you've noticed this, what are you gonna do about it?
right.
Well, I said, "Did you have to talk on the phone for that full hour and deal with a" for me personally, that's a boundary that I set a long time ago. I noticed that I drive and I would if I was on a call, even if it's just like my sister, it's nothing work related. I would get there and just be jangled and stressed.
Yeah.
So I started using that time for prayer and for listening to uplifting podcasts and audiobooks and things like that. So I arrive and I feel fresh and I have kind of decompressed before I walk in the door.
Right.
So having the kind of deciding those things, this all goes back to self-awareness. Being
Mhm.
able to notice how she was walking in the door is a self-awareness moment. And so, okay, if you don't like what your the result of that, what are you going to do about it to change it?
Mhm. Mhm.
And it's a boundary. And
Yeah.
so yeah.
If you could go back and talk to your younger self, what would you tell that person?
Oh, wow, what a good question. I would probably, for one thing, say that, Jen, you needn't worry. People aren't thinking about you as much as you think they are. So get over it. Number one. And number two, the message of the book is that part of the message of the book is that you were made the way you are for a reason. And you should not only lean into that, embrace it, expand upon it, because that's you were made that way for a reason. And I went for so many years trying to be something I'm not.
Mm,
Um, and so that was a big lesson for me. Um, and the message, of the book, and this isn't, you know, I I talk about this in the book. It's like for years, I felt like I was the youngest one at the conference table, you know? I was like the kid sitting at the grown-ups table, but I didn't quite reach up high enough. And
yeah.
then it's like I blinked and now I'm older and I'm ignored or I'm invisible. And I'm like, what the heck? Was I the perfect age at like 10 o'clock on a Tuesday and I missed it? I went to the bathroom. I went
All right.
fishing that day. I don't know what happened. It's never too early and it's never too late.
Mm,
So to be who you were meant to be. And so lean into those quirks. It's funny because for all of my growing up years, we would get report cards. My grades were always good, but I always had a U for unsatisfactory in conduct because I talked too much. And I kind of look at it as I got the last laugh because I'm a
mm,
paid professional speaker. So,
yeah. Yeah.
lean into that instead of trying to mask who you are, um, lean into it. And
Sure.
what I tell clients and in my speaking, it's figure out who you are at your core and bring more of you to everything you do.
Yeah. That's so good. That's so good. Well, we're kind of at the point in each episode where I like to give the guests what I call the shameless plug. So if you do have any sort of speaking events that are coming up, sometime this summer would be great, or, I'm going to put all of the information to access your book on Amazon and things like that. But this is your moment of shameless plug. So what would you like
Awesome,
to talk
awesome.
about?
Thanks, Rachel. Well, one thing I'd like, excuse me, to offer to your listeners, I use every tool that I teach. And there's one tool that actually is not in the book, but I'd like to offer it to you. I'd like to tell a really quick story. So I was in the messy middle of finishing this book, right? And it's just like, oh, I just need to get it done.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, what could I use as an incentive to get my butt in the chair and make myself do it? And so I use this tool, and it's an opportunity to take a moment and dream. So many women have never even really thought about what it is that they want. I ask them what I call the Spice Girl question. So tell me what you want, what you really, really want. And they have a tough time answering it.
Yeah.
So this tool helps you to sit back and think about, we don't want to think about the how, we don't want to think about the when and all the different, we don't want to think about the money or the time or any of the things that could get in the way. We just want to like just purely dream. And when I did this exercise, one of the things that came up, so it's making a list of things that you want to be, do, or have in your life. And so it didn't come up in the top 10, didn't come up in the top 20, because those are the things that are easy, and low hanging fruit. Like I've already thought about this. I know we could afford it in a couple years. Those are things you've already considered or that you feel like are doable. But
Right.
when you get beyond that, it's going to be like, whoa, I'm really kind of out there dreaming. Well, the thing that came up for me that I wanted was a she shed. Now, to be clear, I ain't got no room in my backyard for no she shed. I have a pool and a pool house, and I didn't have room to build another shed.
Right.
But that was on my list because I started embroidery and applique for my grandchildren, and I had started having this envie, which is Cajun culture. It's a craving for watercolor painting.
Mm.
So I wanted this, she said. Well, that just made the list. And I started, just kind of that's in the back of my mind rolling around. And I was like, ultimately, the answer was right under my nose, or actually, I should say above my head, because upstairs, I used to call it the fraternity house. It was my boys, but my boys had the upstairs to themselves. So they have a big den and bedrooms, and they've flown the coop. So I had that big den. Well, the rest of the story. We ended up making it my she shed.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to do is offer to your listeners this tool to use, and I'd love to have them let me know what comes up for them. So if you go to Jennifer Ledet, and again it's LEDET.com, jenniferledet.com/dream list, and you can pop your email in, download that list. And I'd love to hear what comes out for people. You'll start to get my monthly newsletters, which are quick tips for women who want to live and lead by choice, not by chance. And just like a way for us to start engaging and start a conversation. I do speak at conferences. I facilitate leadership team retreats, executive team retreats, C-suite team retreats, that kind of thing. Speak at conferences. Loving speaking at women's conferences, obviously as an opportunity to promote the book, which you can see right here. And one of the things that's a lot of fun is I'm selling the book at these conferences, but also we often are able to have the conference or a sponsor pay for a copy of the book for everyone in the audience, which is so much fun.
Nice.
And I really, really enjoy that. I enjoy getting the feedback from people. Would you mind if I take a moment? I want to read one quick blurb from the beginning of the book. This is a quote by F. Scott Fitzgerald. So it kind of sums it up for me. For what it's worth, it's never too late, or in my case, too early to be whoever you want to be. There's no time limit. Start whenever you want. You can change or stay the same. There are no rules to this thing. We can make the best or the worst of it. I hope you make the best of it, and I hope you see things that startle you. I hope you feel things you've never felt before. I hope you meet people with a different point of view. I hope you live a life you're proud of. If you find that you're not, I hope you have the courage to start all over again. And I tear up every time I read that. And that's of Scott Fitzgerald. I wish I had written it, but I
Yeah.
didn't.
No,
So,
that's beautiful.
yeah, so I also am open to potentially hosting some women's in-person retreats. And I'm considering revitalizing and reopening my women's Live and Lead by Choice virtual community. So connect with me, jenniferledet.com, and we'll have a conversation. Potentially going to be starting a wait list for my community. And I want to hear if people want an in-person retreat where we walk through some of the framework in the book. So so yeah, that's I'm available. You can find me on LinkedIn at Jennifer H. Ledet. X is also Jennifer H. Ledet. And my website obviously is jenniferledet.com.
Awesome. And I'm going to put all of that social media information in the show notes. So if you're listening to this right now and you're maybe driving and you're not able to write it down, you can just go look at the show notes whenever you get to a safer place to look up the information and do what you got to do from there. And if you're not connected with Jennifer, I really encourage you to reach out to her to connect with her. Even if you're just following along on whatever social media platform, because I think it's important for us to have those words of affirmation, kind of that positive encouragement and just reminders of who we want to be as leaders, who we want to be as people. I think that can be really, really helpful. Jennifer, thank you so much for sharing today and for taking time, taking a few heartbeats out of your day to share some words of wisdom with us. It's appreciated.
Oh, Rachel, I've enjoyed every minute. Thank you for inviting me. And I look forward to staying connected and continuing the convo.
Likewise, likewise. And if you're listening to this, if you liked what you heard, again, don't hesitate to hit that subscribe button. That way you'll be notified whenever new content is posted. And if you know somebody that could maybe benefit from this episode, so maybe they're dealing with some of the things that we talked about, share the information with them. You can tag me, you can tag Jennifer. We're happy to come alongside and help these individuals on their journey with leadership as well. And remember, you are made to be a leader no matter where it is that you're leading. The things that we talked about today can help you develop the roots of your leadership so you can weather any storm. Make sure you take care of yourself, take care of your team. You can 1000% do this. And until next time.